Hello, today I wanted to talk about anxiety. If you haven't seen any of my wellness videos before, I am a counselor, certified. I am a nationally certified counselor, a licensed professional counselor, and a certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor. And I have my master's degree. But anyway, I had written a blog post recently about anxiety, and I decided to do that because anxiety is one of the most common mental health issues in America today. And I have a lot more information on my blog as far as some studies that were done and the numbers, and approximately 40 million adults suffer from it every year. Now, to an extent, some anxiety is perfectly normal, like if you got a big test coming up at school or a big presentation at work. That's perfectly normal. When it becomes a problem is when it starts negatively impacting your everyday life, whether it's, your relationships with people, affecting your work, school, your health, basically affects your functioning in some way. And anxiety symptoms can take on many different forms. Obviously feeling nervous or worried, and that it's difficult to control. Feeling on edge, feeling kind of irritable and cranky, muscle tension, trouble sleeping, increased heart rate and blood pressure, ulcers, things like that. And so there are many different types of anxiety, but today I'm just going to be talking about anxiety in the general sense, and more specifically generalized anxiety disorder. Now, not only do we have the sort of mental effects of anxiety, we also have physical and physiological effects of anxiety. Our pupils dilate, our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate kicks up into gear, and all of these chemicals are released in our brain to help deal with whatever it is that's making you nervous. So whatever the threat is, the perceived threat. You may be familiar with the fight or flight syndrome, which is really, we tend to instinctively do one of three things when faced with a threat. We want to fight it, attack it, neutralize it. We want to flee or run, get out of there as soon as possible to avoid it, or freeze. Those responses from our bodies are really good, and they're important because they keep us safe. We get these bells ringing off that let us know something is wrong, and then it's our bodies respond to that to keep us safe, to keep to survive. The problem comes in when we start operating out of that all the time, when it's not getting shut off. Our bodies are not meant to be functioning in this high arousal state all the time, and that can actually be toxic for our bodies. And plus just really uncomfortable, really difficult for us and our loved ones too. And since the fight or flight response kicks in from a perceived threat, sometimes when we kind of get stuck in an anxiety or an anxious mindset, anything can become a perceived threat. The majority of the time, we're safe. 9 times out of 10, looking around, we're okay. Now that could change any minute from now, but generally in the here and now, we're safe. But anxiety usually kicks in from worrying about the past, which is dead and gone, or the future, which is completely imaginary. If you're dealing with anxiety or someone you love is, I want to give you a few tricks and tips on how to deal with it and hopefully overcome it. The good news is anxiety is very, very treatable. You don't have to stay feeling like this, living like this. So the first thing to know is that it all starts in the mind. And so you want to kind of start to figure out what is causing this anxiety. What brought it on? What were you thinking about? What was happening around you? What was your response to what was happening? So you can trace back what your triggers are, what's triggering the anxiety and causing it to come on. Sometimes anxiety is something that maybe we're stuffing down and not wanting to deal with, and it's sort of screaming to get out. And so we really want to look at how our thought process is in response to stress. So for example, if an employer, your boss, or a teacher asks to talk to you after class or after work, how do you respond to it mentally in that moment? Are you assuming that it's going to be a negative conversation? Are you assuming that what they have to say is going to be a criticism? Because if we assume that, then the anxiety kicks in, we start to get worried, and then all of the physical responses start to happen in response to that. And so take your time with this, be patient with yourself, because sometimes, we have to really kind of think about it over time. The answers don't always jump out at us all the time. We have to be able to kind of sit with it and think about it. Jot the answers to these questions down. Give yourself a break though. If you have to revisit these questions repeatedly before you can kind of figure out what it is, that's perfectly normal. After you get some of that figured out, we want to take care of what's happening within our bodies. A really important thing to do is to be able to shut those physiological responses off at the pass. We want to head them off at the pass before they start really kicking in and getting us really upset. So the first thing you can do is keep your breathing steady and slow, because as soon as we start to get nervous, what tends to happen is our breathing picks up and we tend to take these short, shallow breaths, like, okay, and then when we do that, our heart rate starts going a mile a minute, and then our brain kind of says, oops, something's wrong, and everything else starts to happen. So the first thing you can do is take slow, deep breaths. I know it sounds really simple, and I'm not saying that's the only thing you do, but that is the first thing you want to do, because it will keep a lot of those other physiological responses from ever getting triggered or activated. So just slow, deep breaths in through the nose, very slowly, hold it a second or two, and then exhale very slowly. Not like, that's not going to help at all. We don't want to hyperventilate. Also, we want to keep our muscles relaxed. You might be surprised how tense your entire body gets. And different people carry stress in different muscles. A lot of people, they might carry it in their shoulders or in their back or their hands. I mean, it could be anywhere in your body. And one technique to try is progressive muscle relaxation. This is really great, especially if you're having a hard time sleeping. And you can do this any time of day, anywhere, but it's excellent. And basically what you do is you go through different muscle groups and you flex that muscle group for a few seconds and hold it, and then release it. And then after you release it, it releases a lot of the stored up tension. And what you can do is you can easily do a search on the internet for a progressive muscle relaxation series that you can follow, and it'll tell you it'll walk you through step by step. Or if you're interested in me filming or doing a blog post on that, let me know in the comments below and I can do that. Another thing we want to do to deal with anxiety is to have some sort of regular exercise program you follow. Because what that does is it helps us release all of that stored up stress and energy, that nervous energy. It helps us release that. The sweat releases a lot of those toxins that get released from our brain. When we sweat, a lot of the toxins that are stored up in our bodies from a response to stress, they're able to be released. And after we exercise, the chemicals in our brain kind of go back to a nice resting place, rather that they're not going to be as elevated, and the stress level isn't going to be as elevated as it was before you exercise. So you're physically getting it out. It doesn't matter what you do as long as it's something you enjoy and it gets your heart rate up. And then also stretching afterwards. Stretching is a really good way to release pent up muscle tension and the toxins that are stored up in our bodies. Another really important way to cope with anxiety is through meditation or prayer and spiritual practices. Studies show that people who were dealing with anxiety and practiced prayer and meditation as a response to their moderate to severe anxiety, 20 out of 22 participants said that after 3 months their anxiety was significantly reduced. And another thing to know that's really interesting too, when we're praying and meditating, we're using actually the most advanced part of our brains, which is what gets dampened while we're in the fight or flight syndrome. That's more like survival mode. Those are some really good ways to physically deal with it. Now, going back to our minds and our thought processes that respond to anxiety, once we begin to identify some of our anxious thought processes, and how they lead from one to the next, such as using the example I spoke of a minute ago. So our boss or our teacher wants to talk to us. What if it's something bad? Oh my gosh, am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to get a bad grade? Am I going to get fired? And so you can see how one anxious thought can easily lead to the next. Try not to spend too much time try not to spend too much time exposing yourself to stressful material, such as reading stressful books like about crime novels or true crime television, or even the news sometimes can be really stressful because so much of the time they're putting out there bad things that are going on. And so it makes us start to feel like bad things are everywhere and they're around every corner, even though most of the time they don't happen to the majority of us most of the time. Now, if you are in a situation where you are not physically safe, then you definitely, there's no point in even trying to do these exercises yet. The first thing to do is get out of that situation and contact a helping professional in your area to help you get to a safe place. And again, don't be hard on yourself. This is a very normal thing that's occurring with people nowadays as society gets bigger and busier. And also being around really other people who deal with anxiety or even just stressful people. You ever notice that when you're around some people, you leave that encounter and you go, like I feel stressed out right now. And that's because anxiety, to a certain degree, can be contagious. And what I mean by that is studies show that whoever you're standing next to, heart rate and brain waves are going to respond to each other's. So for instance, if you're near someone whose heart rate is going up and they're really anxious, your brain's going to pick up on that and say, something's wrong, there's a threat. And then it's going to start to kick in that response. And so if you feel that way, again, just start with some of the exercises that I've talked about a couple of minutes ago, and just be aware of that. Be aware of people or situations that are really causing you a lot of stress. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this is helpful. Again, if you want more information, there's much more information on my blog, which I'll post a link to down below. And if you have any questions, please comment below, or if there's any other videos you'd like to see either on different types of anxiety or any other counseling related video, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of each other, be blessed, and have a great day.